Sir, I'm really sorry to hear about your wife, especially after you lost all your money, but I'd like to inform you you've just been made a lord.
A lord!
Let me guess, you want to become a lord or lady? Don't worry, I got you. My friends over at Established Titles have hooked me up with a sweet 10% discount on top of their already running sale to give you the best and sweetest prices on your new title. It also comes with a square foot of land on a private estate in Scotland, and the first 200 to click the link will actually have all of their plots right next to each other. And they actually plant a tree somewhere in the world with every purchase. So what are you waiting for? Go to establishedtitles.com/Mortis and get your gift now. But for now, it's time to get comfortable and let the darkness take control. I'm a 29-year-old male. At the time of this story, I was 21. I had just moved to a new state and was enjoying the downtown bar nightlife, walking back to my apartment with a friend called Gabe. We live in a major city, that is, a metropolitan area, so there are tons of alleys and side streets. We're walking past a garage when we heard what sounded like a loud thud and a splash. We assumed it was probably just water dripping off the top of some 50-story building, so we kept walking. As we approached an alley, to the left of us, we both looked down towards the direction we'd both heard that thud and the noise splash earlier. There on the ground was the body of the man who had just seemingly jumped to his death. As Gabe and I got closer, we could tell the man was in fact not dead, but attempting to stand up, his broken bones sticking out of his legs and half of his face now pushed into his brain. As Gabe and I were freaking out about who needed to call the cops, we heard a man yell, "Hey!" at us from the other end of the alley and start running at us at full speed. We both noped it out of there, and Gabe called the police as we ran. I turned around about 2 blocks later to see if the man was still chasing us, and he wasn't. He was standing at the opening of the alley that Gabe and I had just ran from, and I could see 2 more men in all black join him at the alley entrance before all 3 men turned around and casually walked back down the alleyway. I don't know whatever happened to that man. I tried to look up news articles in my area that matched the incident online with no luck. My friend Gabe and I have never forgotten that terrifying experience. We once spoke about it a few years ago and both had the same questions. Did those men really throw the man off the top of that building? And what would have happened if those men had caught up to us? Would they have killed us? I get goosebumps just thinking about it. This happened many years ago when I worked on the 14th floor of an office building in San Francisco. I started work at 8 a.m. before the building opened, and the front doors were still locked, as the front desk/security usually got there around 8:30. I used my fob and walked into the building's first floor, which was nothing but a lobby and 6 elevators. Immediately I see someone standing there, right in front of the elevators with a huge jacket on and a hood covering his face. He doesn't look at me, but just keeps staring at the elevators. I was usually the only person in the building that early. My co-worker, who also started at 8 a.m., would sometimes arrive at the same time as me, but usually I rode the elevator myself. I press the up button and wait for the elevator to arrive, as the person just keeps standing there, in the front of the furthest elevator from the entrance. Something you need to know is that the elevators are locked until the building is open, so you have to put in a code, and each floor has a separate code. So for instance, my floor's code was 141414 or something like that, and if you punch it in, it took you to the 14th floor. Also, 5 of the elevators only go to the 10th floor. Elevator 1 only goes to floors 11 to 14. As I wait, I hear the person whispering to himself. He steals a glance at me, and then looks straight towards the elevator again. I'm kind of freaking out at this point, but since you need a key to get in, I sort of assume he must work there and must be waiting for the elevator. Elevator 6 opens and he walks in. I stay waiting for elevator 1 to get to my floor, but I feel instant relief as the door shut behind him, and I can hear my elevator still traveling down the lobby. I realize his hasn't started moving up. Instantly, I realize he doesn't work there, as he clearly doesn't know how to put the code in to get it to move up. The doors to the elevators finally open and I rush in and start punching in my code. Right as the doors are about to shut, I see a hand grab them and force them open. He gets in and closes the door as the elevators start going up. He presses the button for floor 5, but it doesn't light up, and the elevator just keeps going and passes the 5th floor. He's not looking at me, but kind of just whimpering, and grabs his arm and reaching into the side of his jacket. I don't say a word, but kind of move into the corner as far away from him as possible. He keeps looking at me, whimpering, rocking back and forth a little, his hand now inside his inner jacket pocket, fumbling with something. The elevator gets to the 14th floor and I book it out. He stays in the elevator. My office had the entire floor, but there was still another locked door to get into our lobby from the elevator, and I run towards it, key in hand. I start to unlock it, when I realize, like a movie scene, the lock won't turn. Our doors were glass, and I see my co-worker is already at his desk looking at me, realizing something isn't right. I look behind me and see the guy in the elevator is now running at me full speed, teeth gritted. He is screaming things, and I feel like things are in slow motion. I begin pounding on the door, and somehow my key instantly clicks and the door opens, and I slam it behind me as he smashes right into it. My co-worker and I call 911, but the worst part was it took them 20 minutes to arrive. We had to just stand there by the glass door and watch the guy who was pacing, putting his face against the glass and licking it and screaming at us. He couldn't leave the lobby because you needed a code to get down. So we just had to watch him until the police arrived and arrested him. When my dad was in his early 20s, he was in a band staying in a hotel with his then girlfriend when he woke up in the middle of the night to someone trying to sexually assault her. He pushed him off her and they began a fight. He tells the story comically about how they fought through the hotel and out on the street. Long story short, the guy ends up stabbing my dad 11 times and leaving him to die on the sidewalk. A stranger was walking his dog at 5 a.m, calls an ambulance and keeps on his way. They come and save my old man, re-inflate his lung, and he survives. The attacker gets caught and is thrown in jail. Find out he had gotten out of jail 2 days prior for the attack of stabbing another person to death. Fast forward a few years again and my dad's playing in a band in a bar owned by his buddy, and spots the guy that stabbed him. He tells his friend who owns the bar that he's the guy that has to go, and that he nearly killed him. The stabber gets kicked out, and was found hanging the next day in his hotel room. 35 years later, my aunt moves to the city we live in, and hits up some dating app, and meets the officer who responded to my dad's attack, when he was a rookie. So, a lifetime later, my dad gets to shake the hand of the cop who helped save his life nearly 4 decades earlier. Just crazy. Okay, before this story starts, I want to let you know that it's super long, but there's a big twist and the payoff is huge, and I really recommend you stay to the end. I'm about to relay one of the most traumatic experiences of my life, but in order to do that, I need to take you back. This began in 2016, in October. I was living in Mission Valley in San Diego. I loved living there because it's pretty central to all the action in San Diego. 15 minutes away from the beach and downtown, but not run down or overcrowded like other areas. The apartment I was living in was in a nicer development, and luxury apartments were being built across the street. It's basically a safe area. Well, this morning, I decided to go for a run to the Fenton Parkway shopping center. In it, there's a bunch of restaurants, along with a Costco, IKEA, and the library. This center also has a trolley stop. That is important. My plan was to run to the center and treat myself to a Starbucks as a reward for working out. I was really into running at the time, and I remember exactly what I was wearing too. Running shorts, and one of those shirt tanks with the sides cut off where you can see the sports bra underneath. It was pink. I was just doing my thing. I get there, finish up my Starbucks when my dad calls me, and my dad fills me in that my younger brother Daniel was in the hospital. This wasn't shocking news to me. My parents had been debating about whether or not he should go in. I had said the night before that I thought he should. Here's some crucial backstory on why they were telling me this. Mental illness sucks, and it runs in my family. My mum has suffered from depression since I was born, and my little brother had been showing signs and symptoms of someone who was developing schizophrenia. My whole family was worried about him, and the night before I had talked to my folks and advised them he go to inpatient to at least be safe. I myself had 2 episodes of extremely bad depression in my lifetime at this point, and they sucked. 2015 to 16 had been the worst year of my life, and ultimately culminated in a hospital stay after months of refusing to be helped. This was in July of 2016, and it was a turning point for me. I got on medication, reconnected with family and friends after isolating for a year, and began rebuilding my life. It obviously wasn't that easy. But things totally turned around for the better. And by October of 2016, when this story takes place, I was happier than I had been before, loving life and waking up every day with actual confidence and eagerness to start the day. If it sounds like a complete 180, well, that's because it was. Cue a bipolar cycle that I wasn't even aware of having. Just a side note, I've always struggled with social anxiety to a degree. Even without depression, I get anxious, and I'm too hyper-aware of myself when interacting in a group. I'm really friendly and hide it well, I think, but at the core, I'm pretty introverted and reserved. I'm sure everyone experienced this to some degree, obviously, but I remember envying others that were so easy when socializing, who seemed to have it come naturally. I never had it. But in fall of 2016, it was different. It was a bit like the trailer for the movie I Feel Pretty. Confidence. I suddenly had tons of it. Looking back at things, it's clear it was just hypnomanic, but at the time I had no idea what was happening. I just felt like I was self-actualizing, and finally the person I wanted to be. Confident, pretty, smart, outgoing, generous, kind. I had the words to say and could strike up conversations with anyone. More than that, I wanted to. I felt like I connected with everyone and could be anyone's friend. I was really spiritual at the time too. I grew up a pastor's kid and have always had faith, but now more than ever I felt connected to the Lord, and I swear I was seeing signs of his existence everywhere. Which is also a common trend in mania that I did not know about. I learned this later. Okay, back to the story. While I'm on the phone call with my dad, I kind of distractedly started walking around the center. I make my way over to the library parking lot, and there are a few people milling around because it hasn't opened yet. Honestly, I was in my own little world with this conversation, and didn't really care if people could overhear me. Normally, I hate talking on the phone in public, but Kelly 2.0 couldn't care less. I remember praying with my dad for my little brother's health and talking about how crazy life is, because I had been in a similar situation just a few months back of feeling hopelessly suicidal, totally oversharing in public, but whatever. I get off the call and get a tap on my shoulder. "Excuse me, miss." I turn around and a short man in his 60s wearing a hat that says Navy on it is standing to my right. "Excuse me, I couldn't help but overhear your conversation. Are you Christian?" "Why, yes," I said. "I am too. My name's Tony. I just wanted to say that I'm inspired by your faith and wanted to ask if it's okay to pray for your brother as well." I was honestly so touched by the kindness of this random stranger. It was a bold thing to do, but at the time, I just remember being really inspired and moved that he would offer to pray with me. I actually thought he might be a pastor or something. He had that vibe. People talk about creeps and how they're dirty and classically creepy looking. I honestly didn't get that vibe from this guy at all. I mean, it was 9 a.m. on a sunny October morning, with other people around, and I didn't feel threatened in the least. He wasn't asking for anything. He's 5'5" and I'm 6 foot. So I say sure, and we move to a bench where he prays a short prayer. Short but meaningful. During his prayer, at one point he puts his hand on my knee. I'm uncomfortable with this, and was about to shift, but before I'm about to, he removes it. I was too polite to say anything. as he continued praying. A lot of people in church will lay hands on each other to pray as a sign of comfort, and this isn't something setting off huge alarm bells, but I remember how it felt in that second vividly. Exposed and uncomfortable. Now I look back on what I was wearing and felt sick. It's so painfully obvious why I was approached, but at the time I was naively trusting in the goodness of strangers. I forget how the conversation went exactly, but we basically launched into a very deep conversation about life. I would normally never be this open with a stranger, but I was hypomanically friendly, and he was very funny and well-spoken. He tells me that he's a Navy veteran. I revealed that I used to work with vets as a nurse, and we bonded over that. He mentions that his wife Gloria was a nurse, but she passed away in 2005, and then things went downhill for him. I shared about my past year and how hard it had been as well. He said he could definitely relate to the struggle, and revealed that he was living in a shelter and goes to the library every day because he's studying to go back to school with some military-assisted program, and he's only survived this long because of faith. I forget what else he mentioned in all honesty, but the conversation lasted for over an hour outside in the sunshine. This guy was incredibly insightful and eloquent. He had some really good insights into the Bible, and it was clear he knew his stuff. Before I leave, he asked if I wanted to stay in touch, and maybe even meet at the library again for Bible study. I said sure. We swapped email addresses, and I remember running home thinking how cool it was, human connection and meeting another strong Christian and all that. When I got home, I even wrote a blog post about it. I still have it now, and reading it makes me cringe in hindsight. 2 days later, I receive an email from Tony. I open it up, and I'm surprised because of how well-spoken he was in person. This dude has the writing of a 10-year-old on AIM, all caps and run-on sentences. I still have the emails. He wrote something about meeting up at the library, prayer, and my brother. I made a mental note to get back to him, but got distracted and forgot. And then I received another email the next day. He sounded a bit desperate. He basically asked if I was very busy, and wanted me to confirm if I was going to go in or not, and called me a sister in Christ, and that because it'd been 2 days he was starting to worry. I emailed him back updating him on my brother, and said I would be free to meet up the following week. He replied that he was glad that my brother was doing better, and that if we could meet in the library on Wednesday, at around 8:30, and that his life has been a blessing because I have come into it, as well as other stuff. I reread his emails cringing at so many red flags. It makes me want to punch myself in the face. I'm a 24-year-old woman, not an 8-year-old, and this guy's pushy. He would call me honeyboo. I know it's obviously weird, but honestly at the time I truly dismissed it, as I thought it was a term of endearment in a grandpa way. I told my cousin Emily about meeting Tony, and we planned the meetup. And then she messaged me this: "Kel, if you decide to do this, please meet in a public place and bring Scott, my older brother, who I lived with at the time. He's 2 years older than me and 6'7", and one of my best friends. You have a beautiful heart, don't know how pretty you are, and I don't want this guy getting the wrong idea." I definitely remember laughing at the thought of some romantic thing. This dude was literally old enough to be my grandpa, and looks like a cousin of Gary Coleman. It was comical to me, but there was no way I was interested, and he obviously knew that. We were meeting for Bible study. But then my head returned to the moment at the library and think, I should just to be safe. Scott agrees to go with me. I didn't mention it to Tony that he'd be coming because it was kind of a last-minute plan, and honestly, even though I enjoyed meeting for the first time, I also had a life and other things going on in it, so I didn't want to meet for more than an hour because I had things to do. We get to the subway next to the library, and he's there waiting. I introduce him to my brother, and Tony cracks a few jokes about how he feels so short next to him, so we all laughed and began talking, and after 5 minutes Tony makes this comment: "So nice to meet you, Scott, I hope to see you again," as in basically dismissing him. Scott and I exchange glances, and Scott replies that he drove me here, so he's going to join in. Without missing a beat, Tony goes, "The more the merrier." I remember feeling relieved. We all talked for about an hour, and it's truly another great conversation. We literally had Bible study. It was very engaging. Scott and I brought him a sandwich, and we had lunch. After we left, I asked Scott what he thought. Scott agreed that he was nice too, and a cool guy. We thought it was obvious Tony thought he was meeting with just me, and how Scott felt he was expected to leave at first, but chalked it up to Tony not staying for Bible study. After that, I received an email that basically read, "Thank you for the food and great morning," and that he had a great time chatting with both of us, that he will continue praying, and thank you for being the friend I am. Signed off as my BFF, Tony. Reading the emails are very cringe, but I chalked it up to him being lonely and genuinely looking for a friend. We continued to email back and forth. For every one email I would send, he would send back at least 3 or 4. At one point he sends me this: "Send me a pic of you so I can look when I need that extra smile." And I did. I felt straight weird sending one, but I swear to God I opened up my photo booth and took a picture of me, making a funny face and waving at the camera. I didn't tell anyone he asked for a picture because I knew he sounded textbook creepy, but I rationalized it in my head that he was old and lonely and just looking for a friend, and that he loved me as he would a daughter. I think we met up 4 more times. Tony lived out in Santee, but would take the trolley to Mission Valley. We met up 1 more time in Starbucks, but Scott couldn't make it. I didn't really have any qualms at this point. I didn't ask why he was homeless or how he got there, and he never volunteered the information. To this day I wonder what would have happened if I'd have asked. It felt sort of rude to pry, and I figured in due time he would open up. The second time I invited him to attend church with Scott and I. The church we went to is made up of mostly young adults. This Sunday night after the service, the church was hosting a barbecue/fellowship night, and Tony definitely stood out, but he held his own, and during the event I saw him chatting to a few guys from the church. I was glad. I wanted him to meet other Christian men and make more friendships because honestly, it was starting to get a bit suffocating. Tony kept saying that Scott and I were his only friends, but he only communicated with me. On the drive home, I specifically remember him telling me that he introduced himself to the pastor, Wes, and he relayed the conversation they had. Remember this, it's important. November rolls around, and after our last meeting, Tony mentioned his birthday was coming up. I asked to Scott, and because I wanted Tony to feel like he had some sort of family on his birthday, as he told us he had none, we agreed to invite him over for dinner. A super obvious PSA that probably no one needs to hear, but I needed to, is do not invite a homeless stranger into your home, no matter how nice they seem. Dear God, I was genuinely trying to make the guy feel welcome and loved, and it was because of the stigma of homelessness that I wanted to do the opposite and show him that I wasn't afraid to let him see where I lived. Homelessness is dehumanizing, and I wanted him to feel like a person on his birthday. Scott was way more hesitant about letting him come over, and I advocated for Tony, and eventually Scott agreed. I told him to bring his laundry, and I would wash it for him. And we let him wash up beforehand in my bathroom. All so stupid. I also invited my best friend Grace and her boyfriend Robert. I did the cooking. I had asked him his favorite meal: steaks and tons of caramelized onions and butter, salad with Russian dressing, mashed potatoes, and a Dutch apple pie. I went to Ralph's and blew $80 on the ingredients to make it. He was very grateful and said it's the best meal he'd had since his wife passed away. I mentioned that I had a psychiatrist appointment the next day. Tony at this time had gotten one of those Obama phones and would call every once in a while. To be honest, when he got the phone, I was honestly kind of wary about it, because he now had another way to stay in touch with me, and it was kind of draining trying to keep up with him. I have 2 voicemails saved. The guy is textbook manipulative. He changes his voice, his tone. He sounds completely different from one to the other. In the first one, I was running late for a meeting, and he wasn't happy about me not replying. Sunday rolls around, and Tony joins Scott and I for lunch again. After a big group of us decide to go to this Mediterranean place, everyone orders, and by the time we're seated, it's me, Scott, Tony, and our friend Brandon, and my friend Julie are at one end of the table. Tony and Brandon get to talking. I wasn't really paying too much attention because I was chatting with Julia. I paid for Tony's meal, and he originally tried to order some catfish dish, which was literally one of the most expensive meals on the menu, which also sounded disgusting, but I was happy to pay for it. The restaurant was out of it. I remember this distinctly, and then the waitress came back to the table to tell Tony we were out. He made a big deal about it, just kind of abrasive, sighing like he was personally offended, and was sort of demeaning to the waitress when she offered other options. I remember feeling both apologetic towards the waitress and honestly kind of intimidated by him. Once he got the replacement dish, he was back to joking around and being friendly, and I just chalked it up to him being a bit tired or hangry. After dinner, I offered to drive Tony home, and I did so, alone. When he wasn't at the shelter, he said he lived on a bench out in Stanty. I remember this night it had kind of started to rain, and I felt bad for him, and he had a way of making you feel bad for him, for being homeless. Both in his emails and in person, driving out to the bench in the cold. I felt both a nagging obligation to offer him a dry place to sleep, and the disconcerting feeling like he was expecting me to offer. I actually had previously considered it, but both Scott and I discussed it, and we wouldn't want to invite him over to spend the night even once, for fear of setting up a pattern of expectations in the future. I'm nearing the bench. He makes it clear he's unhappy and tired of being homeless. I'm so sick of this. You're the only good thing in my life, Kelly. We chat for a bit. I try to encourage him, and we make plans for me to pick him up for church next week. Right before he exits the car, he leans over and gives me a quick goodnight kiss on the lips. No, not okay. I'm definitely uncomfortable with that. This was crossing the line. I felt immediately weird and violated. I kind of stammer out a goodbye and pull out the parking lot, leaving Tony standing there watching me go. Driving home, I felt gross. I'm also now uncomfortable, as it dawns on me that I just drove a man 40 years older than myself that I really barely knew to an area with no one else around at night. There were no huge no-nos that up until that point I was oblivious to, because hypomanic me just thought I was making a positive impact in Grandpa Tony's life. I got home, and was probably there no more than 30 minutes when Scott receives a text from Brandon. I hadn't told Scott about the kiss at this point. I asked Scott if he still had the conversation, and he did, and it goes like this. Hey, what are your vibes on that guy? He's nice enough, I've talked to him a bit. What was your impression? I agree. I hate to say this, but I'm pretty sure he's a pathological liar. He said he was in the Navy for 8 years and got to the rank of Master Chief. That takes a lifetime of service to get there, and only a few people get there in their life. There were a few other big loopholes I heard too, but he's a nice guy and needs to be loved. Just be careful with him around Kelly and others. Thanks, man, I really appreciate it. I didn't know too much about him yet, and it's good to get other people's input. If you don't mind me asking, what are the loopholes? Well, he said he took someone out by striking pressure points because he did jujitsu. Jujitsu doesn't teach strikes, only grappling, as I do jujitsu. He's just lonely, glad he knows us, and something about getting a PhD from Yale in neuropsychology. Like, he definitely could have been in the Navy, but he's not the Master Chief thing. I have this gut feeling, a sinking one. Scott and I are talking about it. Maybe he's overcompensating for the fact that he's homeless. He goes by Tony, and I knew his full name from his email address, and I hadn't bothered to look it up before. He told me he has no social media accounts, and didn't know the first thing about setting one up. I remember teasing him that he should join the 21st century, and never searched him because there was no reason to do so. I type his name into Google search, and the first thing that pops up makes me want to throw up. It's a mugshot for Megan's Law, and the Tony in the picture is terrifying. This man is a violent, registered sex offender. I instantly feel sick to my stomach and terrified. I had been with this guy an hour ago alone by myself out in the middle of nowhere, Santee. The next result after his mugshot was his Facebook profile, the one he said he never had, and I couldn't stop myself from clicking on it. I wanted to know everything about this guy. All he has is one profile picture and 1,520 friends, all women, all young, my age. When I go to Instagram and search his name, sure enough he's there. The only people he follows are Instagram models in lingerie, women with bare asses and huge boobs, and BDSM stuff. He has 20 followers, and every single one of them is sex-related chat for money. Crap. I call my cousin and aunt, who advises me to report this guy to the police. He hasn't done anything against the law though, really. I feel both gross and conflicted of what to do. He's preying upon young women, and I was stupid enough to fall for it. I call up Pastor West because I knew he had spoken to Tony and Scott, and I was kind of at odds of what to do. "Sup, Killy?" I explained the situation, since Wes is at least familiar with who Tony is since they spoke. "Oh, him! Yeah, I vaguely remember him." Wes meets a lot of people every Sunday, so I assumed he just forgot. "Kelly, I've never spoken to him or even had an interaction with the guy. The only reason I knew who he was is because he was really rude to Monica at the barbecue because she wouldn't let him into the kitchen." Monica is his wife. Holy crap. Tony had told me that they spoke and word for word relayed their conversation to me, but never happened. Instantly, everything has a new meaning and an extra sinister twist to it. I felt both incredibly violated and just mind-screwed that someone could lie that effortlessly straight to my face without missing a beat. I didn't even ask him about Wes. Tony is the one who brought him up. I thought about all other conversations we'd had, and now I knew this guy was just saying whatever he felt like in order to gain my trust, which he did. I let this guy into my home, let him into my shower, showed him pictures of my family. Long story short, after discovering this and talking to my friends and family, I reported Tony to the police and sent him an email explaining that I didn't want any contact with him anymore. I still had some of his laundry at my house and didn't want to give him an excuse to come and get it. In the email, I told him his clothes were clean and he could pick them up at the church, but not to contact me anymore, and I was hoping that would be the end of it. I blocked his number, but hadn't on Gmail. Email after email, dozens, pleading to talk and that he would explain himself. I didn't take the bait. My friend, who actually works for Gavin DeBecker, he wrote the book The Gift for Fear, and it's all about predators who use manipulation to take advantage of you, advised me this: never respond to a stalker. Even if you ignore 500 messages and respond to only one, all that he's taught is the stalker needs to keep bothering you 500 times until he will get a response. The emails started off kindly enough but turned accusatory. He actually threatened suicide in one. I let police know and screenshotted a few. They would not stop, and then I blocked him. The next day, I was terrified to be in my apartment alone. I didn't go anywhere by myself. I bought a mace and taser online, and any time I needed to drive somewhere or return home, I would call Scott or a friend so they would walk with me to my car, if I was in my apartment. Thankfully, Thanksgiving break was next week, and I had a reprieve of the paranoia when Scott and I were home visiting family. When we returned to San Diego, a few days passed, and by this point, it had been 2 weeks since I blocked Tony. No word or sight from him during this time, and although I was extremely anxious to be home alone by myself, with each passing day I grew a little bit more relieved. If he hadn't come by at this point, he probably got the message to leave me alone. Now it was December 4th. Scott had made previous plans to visit LA the upcoming weekend to visit friends, and I had obligations in San Diego. So I felt okay to stay here by myself while he went out of town. The night before, Grace and Robert were hosting a party to celebrate Robert's graduation from EMT school. Knowing we'd be drinking and having a good time, my friend Michaela planned to spend the night, and we would Uber home there together. The night was a blast. We got home at 2 a.m, buzzed and happy, and the next morning I made her breakfast, and she left shortly after at 10 a.m. 10 minutes after she's gone, I hear a knock at the door. I'm praying it's Michaela, realizing she's forgotten something, but I had this huge knot in my stomach as I approach the peephole and look out, and I scream internally. It's Tony. Thank God the door was locked, because even though I didn't answer it and didn't say a word, Tony knew I was home. My car was in the driveway. He didn't say anything, just pounded on the door relentlessly. There's a window if you walk around the door where you can see into the apartment, and even though it was closed, I was freaked out that he would do just that and see me. I ran into Scott's bathroom, which is the furthest thing away from the front door, with a kitchen knife, my mace and my taser, and called 911. I could still hear him pounding the door. I frantically explained to the 911 officer the situation, and they said they would send someone over. I hang up and FaceTime Grace and Robert to let them know what's going on, and they head in their car to my apartment. While this is happening, the knocking stops, and I'm praying he's giving up and left. I then hear a crash on the balcony. I can't see out, and there's no way in hell I'm leaving the bathroom, and I'm positive he had climbed over the railing and was now trying to go through the sliding glass door. The balcony door was locked, though. I was 99% sure, because I'd been vigilant and paranoid about locking the doors, but having coming buzzed the night before, I couldn't remember if I'd double-checked before bed. That 1% uncertainty was terrifying. I dialed 911 in a panic, explaining that the man is trying to break in, and the dispatcher asked if he had weapons. I honestly didn't know. The guy is dangerous, he's cunning, and he had told me himself that he carries a switchblade on the streets for protection. Out of all the lies he told me, I do believe he was in the military, and probably has some combat training at least. The dispatcher tells me to stay on the line until the police arrive, and I couldn't hear anything, and I didn't know if that's because he'd given up, or because he'd opened the door and made it inside. At that moment, I honestly thought I was going to die. I thought Tony was going to break in, abuse me, and kill me. My mind broke in fear, and I remember frantically praying over and over 1,000,000 times. When I hear a loud pounding on the front door, it was the police. I was so terrified it could be Tony pretending to be a police officer, but the 911 dispatcher assured me that it was indeed an officer. I open up the door in a frenzy. 4 cops are standing there, 2 next to my door, and the other 2 are a little off the side with Tony. I had a literal breakdown seeing him. I started sobbing, I was freaking out and inconsolable. The cops took him away, and the main officer was extremely kind and comforting. He gave me instructions on how to file a restraining order. Having that experience and becoming so paranoid about Tony triggers a full-blown mania in me. I couldn't sleep at all for 2 nights straight. I spent the night at Grace's and posted on social media, constantly messaging everyone, and I started believing I had survived death and came out with all these mind-blowing observations on the other side. Ha, yeah. Looking back, so embarrassing the stuff I put out on Facebook, but that's my own story. My family had already been concerned, and that was the tipping point. I got admitted to hospital and ended up staying there for 2 weeks, having become full-blown psychotic at that point. Once I was more stabilized and the hospital issued me a day pass, I went to get my restraining order from the court. I had to face Tony in court to do this, and it was awful. I was praying he wouldn't show, but he did. Brandon and Scott testified, and then it was Tony's turn to speak. This guy straight out lied to the judge's face, and this was a mutual relationship, and that I was in love with him, and that I had changed my mind, and the only reason he went to my house that day was to pick up his laundry. I didn't even have his laundry, and he knew it. God, watching the guy lie and turn on the charm was disgusting, and I was sitting there in the chair trembling. When it was my turn to speak, I presented the judge with printouts of every single email he'd sent me, his Facebook account, Instagram with all the young women. Tony was shocked I had evidence. She threw the book at him. It felt like something from Law and Order, I swear. Gave him this whole speech to never take advantage of a young woman again, or he would have to answer to her. It was sweet justice. He wasn't allowed to be within 100 yards of me and was ordered to stay away from the Fenton Parkway Center. I never saw him again, and I've moved since. The paranoia after that lasted a long time from this experience. One last thing I remember is that while I was showing Tony a video on my phone of my 4-year-old cousin, Charlotte, singing Happy Birthday, she was dancing around in her underwear. And I see Tony watching it with a huge smile. His remark, "What a precious little angel." He had graduated from pedophile to preying on young women. It makes me sick to think about. Tony, let's never meet again. I'm a court clerk for my local courthouse. I work in the clerks of court, both in the office and in the court, split about half. So, on Friday, I was in the office at my desk, which also involves assisting with customers who come into our office and have certain questions on types of filings. I am the backup coverage, especially for our records window. In my state, we are considered public records. Anyone can come in and request copies from any case, unless it's a juvenile, confidential, or sealed by the court. This is really important to the whole story. I was asked to cover the records desk from 4 to 4:30 last Friday, so that our records clerk could leave a tad early. No problem. Around 4:15 we had a frequent flyer, as we dubbed them. The man comes in frequently to get copies out of his cases. I should really note that the way my office is set up is a bit important. We are set up kind of like the DMV. You have to come into the main entrance of security, go down a long hallway, and it opens up to a lobby. There are elevators straight ahead, and the DA's office is to the left and COC to the right. You have to open a separate set of doors to get to our little lobby, and there is a counter with a window in an L shape. I hope you figured that out in your head. The records window is around the corner, tucked away in the back. There are also 3 public terminals where any member of the public can use to research cases in my county. So the man in the back, Joe, has an open family case. He comes in probably once a week to get copies out of his family's case, or I don't know what the hell he's doing. It's really none of my business. He came up to my window somewhere around 4:20 and requested documents. When documents are requested from the public terminals, they go into a queue, which I then go into and select them to print. I went into the queue, glanced at the documents and asked, "Did you have 11 pages?" He said he did, so I selected and printed. I wrote him up a little slip with the number of copies and his total owed, gave him the slip, directed him back to windows 4 to 5 for payment, and that I would meet him there. I grabbed the copies from the printer which jammed, messed with it for a minute, counted the pages, took them to the cashier, and went back to my counter to help the next person in line. The next customer was easy. Her records were prepaid and printed. After the second customer, it was 4:25. My co-worker, work wife, call her Lynn, asked me if I wanted to go thrifting for clothes at Plato's Closet after work. My answer was, yes, let's go. Right as I'm discussing this, I'm in view of the records window, but not at it, and I saw Joe had returned to my counter. So I asked if everything was alright, and he goes, "You must be new." I'm not. I've been at the job almost 4 years and in the legal field almost 10. "No, I'm not," I reply. "How can I help?" He then made a comment about a paperweight I was using. It was a gift from my niece, a painted rock from a 3-year-old. "That's a fancy paperweight you have there. What can I do for you?" "You gave me the wrong case." "No, sir, I printed off what was in the queue. You don't need these 4 pages?" I tossed the 4 pages, then adjusted his slip. 7 pages total, sent him back to the cashier. At this point, it's 4:30. It's Friday and we're closed. I left and headed to Plato's Closet, and it took me about 15 minutes to drive over there. I sat in my car for a few minutes and then went inside. I beat Lynn there. I started browsing. She came in a few minutes later, stating she got caught behind the train. So we start shopping and chatting. For some reason, I looked at the door when it opened. There was Joe. Now I knew it was him because he wears that dumb sock monkey hat. I saw him and got Lynn's attention. Are you seeing what I'm seeing?" So I pulled Lynn into an aisle and we ducked down. He's short, I'm tall, and I wear heels a lot. I could watch his dumb hat around the store. He immediately went to the back of the store. He looks like he was rubbernecking the whole store. He goes to the back of the store, grabs a pair of shoes, glances at them, and continues rubbernecking. I continued to watch him as he moved. We moved opposite. We were legitimately hiding behind clothing racks. He moved around the perimeter of the store, continuing to rubberneck, looking for something or someone. So he leaves. We freak out and check the parking lot to make sure he's gone. We try and shake it off and chalk it up to a coincidence, and then I realized we were talking about it literally in front of him. And Lynn? She's not quiet. She gets scolded on a weekly basis for being loud. I told the cashiers what happened, and we ended up leaving like an hour later. The next day I felt so uneasy about it. I called my boss and told her what happened, and I told her I was going to call the police. I called a non-emergency number and left a message with dispatch, and got a call from an officer some hours later and explained what happened. He said to get Joe's name, which I didn't know completely. He told me he would give me a call back on Wednesday when he was back on duty. I get Joe's name, called the officer back on Monday and left a voicemail. Monday was fine, Tuesday I was out the office, but Wednesday Joe returned. He came back to file documents at 4:20. He took 20 minutes to file 2 affidavits and a motion. It should have been like a minute or 2 because he needed something notarized. He left and I have a bad feeling. I called the officer and told him what happened. The officer said if he comes back Thursday to call and they would come down and speak to him, as the police department is across the street from the courthouse. Thursday rolls around and no Joe until 4:25. He beelined it for the computer in the corner. I messaged my boss, and we'd already put in place a safety plan. The sheriff's deputy he worked security were notified. 3 deputies followed him into my office and I called the police department. 2 officers came down and they questioned him. He admitted to being at Plato's Closet. He was shopping for his 2 younger daughters of 9 and 11. They don't fit clothes at Plato's yet. Plato's has a sister store Once Upon a Child. Those kids don't really fit there either. So he had a receipt in his car for Once Upon a Child at 5:07. He denied hearing my conversation with Lynn, Ari going there after work. He stated he left my office at 4:15 and took his children shopping for clothes. He did not have his children with him at the courthouse or Plato's. He also asked the officer immediately and unpromptly, "Did she call you?" He also started stating that he believed his ex-wife was setting him up. So because my office is a public office and he has made arguably legitimate reasons to come in there, there's nothing the officers can do. They issued him an oral warning and put him on standby. The kicker is, he could opt into his case electronically, but made a big deal about not being able to opt in a few months ago. We told him if he's having issues, he could call the court support line and they would be able to remedy the situation. But instead, he chooses to come in and pay $1.25 per page instead of a one-time $20 fee, which apparently he's also done. If you weren't already freaking out, last year his roommate filed a restraining order against him, followed by his roommate's girlfriend alleging sexual harassment. I won't go into details, let's just say it's more than messy. This doesn't really have a conclusion. Just the other day, he came back. I left while he was still at my office. What am I supposed to do? The officers can't do anything, and I need another incident outside my office to file a restraining order. I've now ordered home security and signed up for self-defense classes, and I'm buying mace and looking into handheld guns. I just don't know what to do with this creep. He isn't leaving me alone. Hey guys, it's Mort here and thank you so much for tuning in to tonight's video. I really hope that you enjoyed it. Hopefully you got sufficiently creeped out by the stories I had on offer for you today. Don't forget to drop a like if you did, subscribe and press the bell icon if you're new, or if you haven't done so already, to be updated every time I post. It's been a fun old week. I should be back for more content on Friday. What it is, I think I'll leave up to you via poll. I'd like to extend a huge thank you, as always, to you guys and my members and patrons, whose names can be seen on screen. Signing up to either of these things offers additional perks, which you can read all about if you are so inclined by clicking the links in the description. But let's wrap it up there, lovely people. Thank you so much for watching. I love you all. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.